Ah yes, the Ojou-sama. Elegant, sophisticated, and 99% of the time, always a giga chick. If there's one thing I always love in an anime, it's a confident, haughty, and eccentric Ojou-sama. Whether they are the bully, a harem member, or best of all, the protagonist, these young noblewomen are always a delight to see in action. You either love him or hate him, but Ojou-samas are a very, very, very iconic archetype in anime. Ojou-samas were once a staple in the anime and anime-adjacent industries, and though they have been on the decline since the 2000s, they're back with a vengeance with the rise of the recent villainess genre. Now, before I start, I do want to point out that Ojou-sama just means young lady in Japanese. Technically, any rich or noble girl counts as an Ojou-sama, but we're specifically talking about the over-the-top oh-ho-hoing Ojou-samas, the ones with the fancy drilled twin tails and that obnoxiously iconic laugh. So I guess this is another one of those anime situations where the Japanese word is a lot less specific than the English loan word, which ends up pretty much taking a life in on its own. This archetype is also sometimes called the himedere, though much like the actual term Ojou-sama, this isn't necessarily limited to the specific trope we're talking about here. Fucking Ame from Needy Streamer Overdose is technically considered a himedere, and she's about as far from nobility as you can get, so I guess Ojou-sama does fit it better. Even in anime itself, you see plenty of princesses and noble girls, and not all of them are whatever the fuck this is. But enough of me talking. Without further ado, this is Meme introducing you to the Ojou-sama. So before I start, I should probably give you a brief overview of this trope. When I refer to the Ojou-sama, I refer to the oh-ho-hoing, desuaing, drill-haired himedere Ojou-sama. They cover their mouths with a limp wrist. The covering is done because allegedly Japanese noblewomen did not find it high class to show their mouths while laughing. I have no clue why their wrist is that way. And of course, they have blonde hair because, you know, Europe. And of course, they have that deliciously lovely laugh. Traditionally, it's well known that Ojou-samas were primarily employed as bullies and antagonists, owing to their high class and fancy demeanor. They're, again, also famous for their drill hair. Fun fact, this is not as common as you'd imagine. A lot of otome games for which the Ojou-sama villainess is said to be common in actually don't feature them all that much. They're a lot more common in animes. Not so much in games, surprisingly enough. From what I've uncovered, the first character that physically resembles the modern trope appears to be Marie Antoinette. No, there we go. From the Rose of Versailles. She was much more of a traditional non-himedere Ojou-sama in terms of personality, of course, originally being meant to be the protagonist of the story before Oscar, who I think is the protagonist of the story, took center stage. She's honestly actually a pretty sympathetic character. Personality-wise, she's actually the classic pure-hearted princess. The only reason I really include her on the list is because of those sausage curls. Y'all know those. Otherwise, she's actually pretty kind-hearted and well-meaning, if not a bit spoiled and out of touch. The first Ojou-sama antagonist proper, with the personality we all know and recognize, comes from 1973 in the form of Aim for Aces, Reika Ryuzaki. From what I gather, she's a bit of what you call a chilly person, at least until she redeems herself and apparently becomes a friend of the protagonist. The next trope maker seems to be Fukiko Ichinomiya from Dear Brother in 1974, who was a bully and ends up being kicked to the sidelines, but sorta redeemed at the end. And in 1975, we get Reimi Miyazuchi from Subek Gandeka and Elisa Ligon from Candy Candy, two arrogant assholes with no redeeming qualities whatsoever, and pretty much stay that way, never really getting a happy ending or much character development. Fun fact, I have partially seen Candy Candy because my mom showed it to me several years ago, because she wanted to show me the sort of stuff she grew up watching, making it the only one on this list that I'm somewhat familiar with. I do admit I haven't actually gotten to the Eliza part though, since I only saw the first couple episodes. Maybe I'll try watching it again. Anyhow, after a long period of allegedly being a staple of shoujo, the trope died due to a death of, well, traditional shoujo stories. I already mentioned to you that they weren't really common in otome games, and while they are a bit more prominent in anime, they're vastly outnumbered by the amount of parodies and non-villainous examples. The only super mainstream classic Ojou-sama that I've seen in anime, well, other than Mia Tearmoon, but I'm not sure she counts as mainstream, is Luvia Jalita Edelfelt from the Fate series, and she's always been portrayed as a good person, if not a tad bit arrogant and a tad bit based. Asking around online, I see that characters like Karen Kanazuki from Street Fighter III from 1998 is another example of an Ojou-sama being a fairly awesome person. None of these girls are villainesses. If anything, they feel more like parodies of such, and whatever elitist vibes they have are silly comedic quirks more than anything too genuine. After a long drought, we start to get more himedere Ojou-samas once more, but due to this revival being linked to the villainous isekai, they're treated more like glorified tsunderes, with maybe a few token bullying attempts before the protagonist ends up taking over their brain, or in this specific anime, being so fruity and down bad that the poor girl just concedes. Nowadays, this trope is far less common than it once used to be, though it still remains well recognized and beloved by many. There's a reason VTubers like Hyakumen Batara Salome managed to get so far playing a role like that. Even when they're not antagonists, they are a lot of fun. A big reason people love Ojou-samas is because of how ridiculously over the top they are. Even when they're the antagonistic bullies, there's something so ridiculous yet awesome about them that you just can't hate them. The Ojou-sama is simultaneously a classic noblewoman, and yet unlike the more realistic portrayal of subdued nobility, the Ojou-sama has a very garish girl boss energy about her that, unlike most Western girl bosses, is less annoying and just plain awesome. Like, take notes, Hollywood. This is how you do a girl boss. I think for people who still don't get it, the closest male example of this would be Dio from JoJo. Like, he may be a jackass, but he's just so damn cool. Just imagine what would happen if Dio was gender swapped. Like, this is what he would look like. Ojou-samas are simultaneously elegant, yet over the top, and just overall really remind you of the wackier, wilder side of anime. And they still manage to have class? I mean, for all their cartooniness, there's still something undoubtedly sophisticated about them. And their arrogant and haughty demeanors, something you normally consider pretty annoying, is rendered fairly inoffensive due to just how ridiculous they are. Much like the trope of, say, the yandere, there's just something so cartoony about the himedere Ojou-sama that ends up making it feel less like a genuine thing and more like a parody. Also, can I just make a comment on their designs? Because I just have to say, they're incredibly beautiful. Man, I just love their hair so much. Maybe I just like complex but still feminine hairstyles, because I would definitely run my fingers through those. That delicate, aristocratic floof. I think I just like long sausage curls. Although, to be fair, sometimes the hair that looks good in animation doesn't look good IRL. But I digress. I also do want to comment on their figures. Alright, detour time. There's this really shitty-ass meme that circulated a couple months back that said, "Men, do you prefer the aristocratic elegance of small-breasted women, or the Nietzschean pro-sex, pro-beauty, large-breasted women?" First off, cringe meme. Second off, false meme. The classic himedere Ojou-sama is almost always curvy. Like, it's honestly one of the unofficial requirements for whatever reason that may or may not have been elaborated on in the last video. Ojou-samas are always curvy, especially compared to our poor Otome protagonist, who's usually more on the flat side. Oh, and by the way, said poor Otome protagonist is usually a commoner, while the Ojou-sama is, well, a lady, so make of that what you will. Cringe meme, hated it then, hate it now. All that aside, Ojou-samas are incredibly versatile. You want a rom-com? Works fine. You want a cool fantasy series? Check. You want an antagonist for your shoujo story? Check. You want a protagonist for your shoujo story? Check. You want a love interest for your protagonist? Check, check, check. There's really nothing they can't do. Personally, I think my favorite subvariant of the himedere Ojou-sama is the fraud. You see this with Salome's lore and to some degree, Furina from Genshin Impact. But the point is that these girls are actually massive liars. They LARP as noble girls for varying different reasons, but at the end of the day, they are just that. Chuny-ass fakers who cover up their lack of confidence with an oh-ho-ho-ho. Okay, maybe not Salome since she's pretty confident, but she's a VTuber and not an actual anime character, so I digress. I think that the underdog Ojou-sama that's honestly more of a quirky dairy theater kid just has so much storytelling potential. And if you do decide to make them a bully, it can be a good way to show how not even those that are formally at the bottom of the rungs are free from being corrupted by the system.
Psst, any writers out there? This is me tossing you an idea.
Come to think of it, I think that's why the reincarnated villainess genre took off as it did. While Katarina Claes, the first one to make the genre truly popular, wasn't the standard himedere Ojou-sama, there's certainly some desire to redeem these girls, both from guys who get horny over them and girls who might actually identify with them in some elements. I guess boys and girls aren't so different after all. By the way, what are all these male fantasies doing in the female romance section? Anyhow, that's basically all there is to it. The classic himedere Ojou-sama endears, despite how over the top they are, because they're just that damn entertaining. They're wacky, over the top, and love him or hate him, they're the stars of any scene. Visually, they are lovely too, and even if this thing isn't really your style, you have to admit, you could recognize that silhouette from a mile away. Through appearance or personality, they always steal the show. I'm not sure what kind of video I intend on making after this one. I could start a new series that's somewhat of a part 2 to my previous video, essentially explaining the personalities of the anime moms. Or I can make a video on Attack on Titan. Oh boy, yeah, that one's gonna be a shit show if anyone even still cares about Attack on Titan. But yeah, all things aside, I sincerely hope that everyone enjoyed this video, and if you did, please give us a like and subscribe. It would also be awesome if you could subscribe to my personal channel, link up in the description here, and yeah, this is Meme, signing off.